Today I'll be telling you about a book I wrote this semester titled A Boston Bestiary. It is a chapter book about Boston's wildlife with one chapter dedicated to each of the least appreciated animals in the city. That is a photo of Boston, but that is not my car. I know that the bumper stickers gel well with my horrible reputation as a preachy vegan. And this is not a photo of me. I would have liked to go out and take a similar photo myself, but quarantine really interfered with that plan. So just use your imagination. This is how I feel about local wildlife. I get extremely excited about squirrels, pigeons, turkeys, raccoons, rats. I think these animals are awesome. But if you go around Boston, most people don't agree. Most people are not that interested. There is one exception. The only person I know who likes these animals more than I do is this woman, who has dedicated an inordinate amount of time to giving healthcare to the local squirrels and feeding them. But other than that, most people are not so interested. And I see this as a problem, a real problem, because one of the best parts of walking through a city, especially this city, is the free entertainment that comes with watching and appreciating the wildlife that's native to our concrete jungle. And one of the simplest ways you can improve your time in this city is by looking at animals. Every time you walk through Boston, you basically have an opportunity to have a mini safari experience. And it is a shame that most of us don't grasp this. Now you might be thinking, well, that's because the animals in this city are boring. And I know actually with certainty that this isn't true. Local animals have nothing, there's nothing actually against them. It's just that they're so common that we're used to them. Common isn't a synonym for uninteresting. And so what I've done is I've written what is essentially a modern bestiary that takes all the most exciting facts and anecdotes about Boston's animals and condenses them into one book. I've spent time reading newspapers, scholarly articles, and works of history to create what is an interdisciplinary tribute to Boston's creatures, and to both give you an idea of what is in my book and to prove my claim that these animals are in fact interesting. I'm going to take a moment to share some of the anecdotes about local animals that appear in my book. So this is a rat, perhaps the most hated animal in Boston. And this is a rat driving a car. He has a steering wheel and a gas pedal, and scientists taught him how to use this so he could drive around the lab collecting food. You see, most people don't know that rats are about as intelligent as dogs, and arguably more so. These animals are incredibly sophisticated. They have incredibly sophisticated emotional lives and mental lives. And they're actually engaged in a never-ending turf war for possession of different neighborhoods in Boston. These rats, they live in large groups, they fight one another, they gain territory, they lose territory. I don't think there's been any drive-by shootings, though this video makes me think that it might be possible. This is a starling. This is one of the most common birds in Boston, though most people in the city, and I've talked to many of them, most people don't even know this bird's name. But as you can see, they're incredibly beautiful. And if this animal was rare, I have no doubt that ornithologists would be clamoring to get a photo of them. But most people don't look for them. I think that if they were rare, they would be as interesting as a parrot. And that's an interesting comparison because this bird actually has mimicry skills that exceed a parrot. Mozart used this animal to help him write music because they had such great musical abilities. And their mimicry skills are so exceptional that they actually will imitate traffic, they'll imitate people talking, even in the wild. And so you can see this bird for free. They're possibly out your window. I think there are some out my window now. And you can see this bird totally for free. They're beautiful. You can listen to them and you might even hear them imitate you. It's basically free access to a parrot at all times. And it isn't just science in my book. I also include many historical anecdotes, especially the history of how these animals got to Boston. Because we kind of have this idea that, oh, the animals are just here, right? This is just where they naturally live. But of course, animals didn't evolve to live in Boston. In many cases, it's actually completely unnatural that they're here and we force them to be here. So Americans used to be really excited about squirrels, especially urban Americans. And the way that Bostonians got squirrels to Boston is actually incredibly convoluted. We brought them in multiple waves, at some points failing, at some points succeeding. And there was actually a time when the city council was debating, because they were spending so many resources on feeding these squirrels. You can see that they built houses for them. They were feeding nuts to them deliberately. We don't do this so much anymore, but they were really putting money into this, that the city council of Boston debated growing and planting nut trees as an investment to save money on future squirrel feeding events. So it was crazy, but that's interesting history that I included. And it isn't just historical anecdotes that I like to include. I also include more modern anecdotes. This is a photo taken in Boston of someone's couch. This raccoon had snuck into their house or broke into their house, ousted the pet Boston Terrier, replaced them on the couch. And since it was an elderly couple who didn't really know what was going on, they didn't realize that their dog, their beloved dog, had been replaced by a raccoon. And they went most of the night without noticing. They only noticed when the old man went over to cuddle his dog and was like, oh my God, this is a raccoon. So it's stories like that that I include in my book. So to write this book, I drew on scientific articles, works of history, contemporary news sources to create a chapter on each local animal that has both fun facts and amusing anecdotes. The writing itself was fun, but writing a book in your free time as a college student is surprisingly stressful. Here's a clip of me writing. And since my colleagues are going to share many graphs and figures, and I don't want to be left out, here is a scientific representation of how long my book was, starting at the beginning of the semester and going to the end. You can see that the blue line is how long I wanted it to be. That decreased pretty steadily as I slowly ran out of time. And you can see that the length of my book, the length I wanted it to be, all of it's converging over time with the bare minimum publishable length. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And so how am I going to publish it? Well, I'm actually going to self-publish it because publishing is an extraordinary marathon that's very difficult. And this is perhaps the most niche of niche books of all time. It's about animals in one city, local animals that most people aren't particularly interested in anyway. So I'm not expecting there's going to be a huge market for this. So even if I was lucky enough to get it published, I don't know how well that would go. So I've hired an illustrator, or I'm working on hiring an illustrator. I'm going to use Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, which also publishes paperback. I might use another company to make a hardcover version, so it'll be illustrated. And I'll be using ACX, which is, again, Amazon. I actually work as an audiobook narrator in my spare time, so I'm going to narrate it myself. And I think that's all I have to say about that. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, I'm open to it. I don't know how this is working, but thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to present.